On a rainy night in Los Angeles, Mike, a struggling Uber driver, stumbled upon a tiny baby boy abandoned in a trash bag. The infant was cold, shivering, and barely breathing, with nothing but a broken silver necklace around his neck. In that moment, Mike knew he couldn't walk away. He had to save this child's life, no matter the cost. The streets of Los Angeles were slick and shiny from the relentless rain, reflecting the neon lights of closed shops and flickering street lamps. Puddles collected in uneven patches along the cracked sidewalks, and the air smelled of wet asphalt mixed with the faint, unpleasant stench of the city's forgotten corners. Mike, a wary man in his mid-30s with tired eyes and calloused hands, rode slowly on his old, beat-up Uber car through a narrow alley he sometimes passed on his way home. Most people avoided this area after dark, but Mike had learned that if you looked closely, even in places the world considered garbage, you could find something of value: a scrap of metal, a piece of wood, anything he could sell to scrape together enough money to pay his rent. He had done this before, more out of desperation than hope, and tonight was no different. He stopped near a heap of trash piled high along the side of the alley. The rain fell heavier here, drumming on the tarps and leaking through holes in old cardboard boxes. Mike pushed his hood back, revealing sweat mixed with rain on his forehead, and approached the pile cautiously. He reached in, feeling around for anything that might be usable. His hands were rough, red from the cold and wet, and his fingers fumbled over soggy paper and plastic. That's when he felt it, a strange, soft resistance, something alive. His first thought was a stray cat or maybe a rat, but then he heard it, a weak, pitiful sound, like the last gasps of someone struggling for life. His heart jumped and his stomach clenched. Mike dug through the layers of trash, his fingers brushing against something small and fragile. He pulled out a soaked, trembling bundle wrapped in a thin, filthy blanket, and the sight made him freeze. It was a baby boy, his skin pale and blue from the cold, lips quivering as he tried to cry. Water dripped from his tiny body onto Mike's clothes, and the scent of mildew and trash filled the air around them. A broken silver necklace hung loosely around the infant's neck, its chain twisted and half buried in the blanket. Mike's mind raced. Who would abandon a child like this? Why, here in the rain, in a trash heap no one would dare approach. None of that mattered in the moment. What mattered was the baby's life, and Mike felt an urgent, overwhelming responsibility he hadn't expected to feel. Without hesitation, he peeled off his soaked jacket and shirt, wrapping them around the boy as best as he could. His hands shook as he held the tiny body close to his chest, pressing the infant against him, trying to transfer warmth. The baby let out a faint cry, a sound so fragile and broken that it tightened something deep in Mike's chest. He whispered hurriedly, words meant more for himself than for the child. "It's okay, I got you. You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." Rain continued to pour around them, soaking Mike to the bone, but he barely noticed. The cold, the mud, the wet clothes, none of it mattered. All that mattered was keeping the boy alive. He looked around, considering his options. It was late, the streets deserted, and the nearest hospital was several blocks away. Mike's old car was parked nearby, but he hesitated. He didn't have any blankets, no car seat, and he had no identification for the baby. The bureaucracy of hospitals and social services loomed in his mind, but he pushed it aside. The first step was simple: get the baby warm, get him breathing, and get him out of the rain. He cradled the infant in his arms and started walking toward the main street, sloshing through puddles, slipping occasionally on the slick pavement, but never loosening his grip. Every step was a battle against exhaustion, against the numbness creeping into his fingers and toes. Reaching the hospital, Mike ran to the emergency entrance, calling for help. A nurse emerged, startled by the sight, a drenched, exhausted man holding a tiny, shivering baby. Mike explained rapidly, voice trembling with urgency, "He was abandoned in the alley. Please, you have to help him." The nurse took the baby immediately, pulling him from Mike's arms with professional efficiency. Mike watched helplessly as they worked to stabilize the boy, his heart hammering in his chest, sweat mixing with rain on his face. He wanted to stay, to be near the child, but the nurse gently insisted he step back, explaining the procedures and paperwork. Mike nodded, though his mind barely registered her words. Hours passed in a blur. Mike stayed in the hospital lobby, shifting from foot to foot, eyes darting toward the nursery doors every time they opened. He barely noticed the luxury of the hospital, the clean, warm floors, the polite staff. All he could think about was the boy whose fragile life now depended on strangers with medical expertise. When the nurse finally returned with news, Mike felt like the ground beneath him shifted. The baby was stable, but he would need ongoing care, and Mike had no way to provide it. He had no money, no home prepared for a child, no legal claim. And yet he knew what he had to do. The nurse left him alone briefly, and Mike sat down on the hard plastic chair, still dripping wet. He removed the broken silver necklace from the baby, examining it closely. The initials engraved were partially visible, a small clue to the child's identity that meant nothing in the moment, but everything in the future. Mike held it tight, a tangible connection to the boy he had chosen to protect. He thought of his own childhood, of the small, lonely moments he had endured, and felt a determination settle in his chest like a fire. He would do whatever it took to give this child a chance. Mike left the hospital that night without knowing exactly how he would manage it. The streets were quieter now, the rain slowing to a drizzle, but the weight of responsibility pressed on him like a physical burden. He returned to his small apartment, a single room in a run-down part of the city, and began making plans. Blankets, baby clothes, formula, he had none of it. But he had love, and he had a commitment that he couldn't break. He arranged for the baby to stay in the hospital for observation overnight, promising to return the next day, and walk back through the dark streets, feeling the wet seep into his bones, yet feeling a strange sense of clarity. His life had changed forever in the space of a single rainy night. That night Mike thought endlessly about names. He wanted something strong, something hopeful. He settled on Ethan, a name that meant strong, firm, because the baby would need that strength to survive the world he had been born into. Ethan would grow up knowing that, even in the darkest and most desperate moments, someone cared enough to save him, to protect him, and to fight for him against impossible odds. And Mike, for his part, vowed that he would be that someone for the rest of his life, no matter what sacrifices it required. By the time he returned home, soaked through and exhausted, Mike understood something profound in saving Ethan. He had found a purpose he had never anticipated. The boy's fragile life had awakened something fierce and unyielding in him. This wasn't just about rescue. It was about creating a future, protecting a soul that the world had cruelly discarded. And he would fight for that future with every ounce of himself, because Ethan deserved a chance, and Mike would see to it that he got one, no matter the cost. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the city still glistened from the previous night's downpour. Mike walked into the hospital with determination, the broken silver necklace clutched tightly in his hand, and a small bag containing the few personal items he could scrounge together. He approached the nurse at the front desk and requested to see Ethan. His voice was firm, carrying a sense of resolve that surprised even himself. "I'm taking him home," he said simply. The nurse hesitated, reminding him of the legal requirements, the paperwork, the foster care procedures. But Mike cut through it with the one argument he had. He would care for this child, love him, and do whatever it took to keep him alive. When he finally held Ethan in his arms again, the baby's tiny body relaxed slightly against him, as if recognizing the warmth and safety that Mike had promised the night before. Every instinct Mike had screamed that he couldn't let this boy go, couldn't hand him over to strangers who would view him as a case number or a temporary ward. Mike understood, perhaps better than anyone else, that love wasn't measured in documents or laws. It was measured in the moments when a human being needed you most and you answered without hesitation. That morning, Mike made a decision he knew would change his life forever. Ethan would be his son, and he would raise him with everything he had, however little that might be. Returning to his small apartment, Mike realized the enormity of the task ahead. He had a space barely big enough for himself, let alone a baby. The walls were thin, the plumbing unreliable, and the furniture sparse and worn. Yet he began rearranging everything, clearing a corner of the room and making a makeshift crib from blankets, pillows, and an old laundry basket. He scavenged baby clothes from thrift stores, cleaned and sanitized them as best as he could, and set up a little feeding station. Every small victory felt monumental, a bottle prepared, a blanket folded, a diaper changed successfully. Mike discovered that parenthood demanded more creativity than any other skill he had learned on the streets of Los Angeles. Feeding Ethan for the first time was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Mike had no formal training, no prior experience with infants, yet he studied every motion carefully, following instinct and observation. He held the bottle with unsteady hands at first, worried he would spill or choke the baby. Ethan sucked eagerly, tiny fingers clutching at Mike's thumb, and the sight filled Mike with a mixture of relief and fierce protectiveness. He realized that the boy depended on him completely, not just for warmth or food, but for trust and love. It was overwhelming to think that someone so small could command such a vast responsibility. But Mike felt a surge of purpose he had never known before. As days turned into weeks, Mike adjusted to a schedule dictated by Ethan's needs rather than his own. Sleep became fragmented, a patchwork of short naps stolen whenever the baby rested. Meals were hurried, often cold or skipped entirely, as Mike attended to every whimper or cry. His Uber earnings dwindled further, as he now had to plan rides around a car seat and a fragile infant. Many clients hesitated when they saw the baby in the back seat, concerned for their own comfort or safety. Mike didn't blame them. He simply accepted the sacrifice as part of the cost of saving a life. Every dollar he earned felt like a lifeline, every bottle of formula victory. The apartment, once merely a place to sleep, became a home infused with Ethan's presence. Toys, even the few Mike could afford, littered the floor. The smell of baby powder mingled with the city's lingering wetness, creating a space that was both chaotic and comforting. Mike learned to read Ethan's tiny signals. A lift of the eyebrows meant hunger, a squirm meant discomfort, a sudden yelp meant fear. Each day he became more attuned, more patient, more attentive. And as Ethan grew stronger, cooing and giggling, Mike found joy in the smallest things: a laugh, a grasped hand, a peaceful sleep on his chest. Despite the challenges, Mike never regretted his decision. He took walks with Ethan bundled against the chill, explaining the world to him in low, steady tones. He marveled at the boy's curiosity, the way Ethan's wide eyes followed every car, every streetlight, every stranger who passed by. Mike dreamed aloud for the first time in years, imagining a future where Ethan could grow up safe and loved, where the mistakes and hardships of his own life would not dictate the boy's path. Each day reinforced the bond between them, a connection built not on blood but on unwavering commitment. Mike also realized the need for community, however small. He sought advice from local parent groups, attended free baby classes at the community center, and reached out to neighbors for occasional help. Some looked at him skeptically, seeing a lone man struggling with an infant, but a few offered encouragement, small gestures that kept Mike's morale intact. He learned to navigate the bureaucracy cautiously, aware that his legal claim to Ethan was tenuous at best, but he refused to let fear or red tape weaken his resolve. The boy's life was in his hands, and Mike was determined to be worthy of that trust. Nighttime brought its own trials. Ethan would wake, sometimes screaming inconsolably, sometimes coughing from a lingering cold. Mike would pace the apartment, rocking the boy, whispering reassurances he hoped Ethan could understand. He discovered reservoirs of patience and strength within himself he hadn't known existed. The physical exhaustion was immense, but it was outweighed by the emotional intensity of watching the child he had rescued grow stronger, healthier, and more aware of the world. Every small milestone, a first smile, a first grasp of a toy, a first uttered syllable became a celebration, a reminder that he had made the right choice. Mike's friends and family were mostly absent, but he made new connections among those who respected his dedication. He learned to rely on their support without shame, finding community in unlikely places: a cashier who offered advice, a neighbor who lent baby clothes, a bus driver who tolerated a restless infant on early morning rides. Every act of kindness reinforced his belief in humanity, even in the midst of hardship, and each time he looked down at Ethan sleeping peacefully against his chest, Mike felt that all the effort, all the sacrifice was justified. As weeks turned into months, Mike began planning for the future. He saved every penny he could, learned about childcare, and even considered returning to school or finding a more stable job once Ethan was older. He decorated a small corner of the apartment as a nursery, filled with colorful blankets, stuffed animals, and books he borrowed from the library. He taught Ethan the first words, the first songs, and the first lessons in trust and love. In these quiet, ordinary moments, the extraordinary bond between them solidified. Through it all, Mike never wavered in his commitment. He faced fear, exhaustion, and uncertainty every day, but he never doubted that he had made the right choice. Ethan was more than a responsibility. He was a son, a living testament to courage and compassion. The broken necklace, once a mere object, became a symbol of survival and connection, a reminder that some moments of fate are more powerful than circumstance, and that love can be the most unshakable foundation in the face of life's harshest realities. By the end of the first year, Ethan was thriving. His eyes sparkled with intelligence and curiosity, and his laughter filled the small apartment, chasing away the shadows of hardship. Mike, though exhausted and often anxious about the future, felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known. He had taken a life abandoned by the world and transformed it into a life full of hope. And in doing so, he had discovered his own capacity for love, resilience, and unyielding devotion. Ethan would grow, learn, and thrive under his care, and Mike knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, father and son, bound by choice, courage, and love. The years following Ethan's rescue passed in a blur of challenges, small victories, and relentless love. Mike settled into a routine that balanced his work as an Uber driver with the constant demands of raising a child. Every day was a negotiation between survival and care. Mornings began with rushed feedings, diaper changes, and preparing for school or playtime. Even though the apartment they lived in was cramped and run down, Mike did his best to make it welcoming. Walls that had once been bare were adorned with colorful drawings and scribbles, handmade mobiles hung over Ethan's bed, and shelves were lined with second-hand books and toys salvaged from thrift stores. Each item carried a story, a memory of effort, or a hard-won success. Money was always tight. Oberfares could fluctuate wildly, and Mike often worked 14-hour days just to cover rent, food, and the little extras Ethan needed. He learned to stretch every dollar, hunting for discounted groceries, scouring thrift shops, and picking up odd jobs whenever possible. Some nights, Mike would come home exhausted, etching from driving and carrying groceries, only to find Ethan awake and smiling, expecting dinner or a bedtime story. The sheer responsibility could have broken him, yet it never did. Every small smile, every giggle, and every night that Ethan slept peacefully reminded Mike why he endured the struggle. He had rescued a life, and he would not fail that life. The neighborhood was a mix of challenges and unexpected support. Many of the residents knew Mike as the scrappy, hard-working man raising a child alone. Some shook their heads skeptically, unsure how a single man could manage, but a few offered small gestures of help, an extra bottle of formula, babysitting for a few hours, or lending a hand during emergencies. These acts, while minor in the grand scheme of things, became lifelines in Mike's daily life. The constant awareness of the world's indifference reminded him of the night he had found Ethan, and it reinforced his resolve to protect the boy at all costs. Ethan grew quickly. By the age of 3, he was curious and clever, asking endless questions about the streets, the buildings, the cars, and the people they encountered. Mike marveled at his intelligence, constantly amazed by the boy's ability to observe, remember, and interpret the world. Yet along with this intelligence came challenges. Ethan was spirited and headstrong, occasionally testing boundaries with stubbornness and tantrums. Mike discovered patience he never knew he possessed, learning to negotiate with reasoning, gentle guidance, and when necessary, firm boundaries. Each confrontation ended with a lesson, each lesson reinforcing the bond of trust and love between them. School brought new hurdles. Public schools in their neighborhood were overcrowded, and resources were limited. Mike could not afford tutors or after-school programs, but he committed to supporting Ethan as much as possible. He read with him every evening, using library books to teach reading and writing, and helped him with homework using patience and encouragement. Despite the lack of material wealth, Ethan excelled. His determination reflected the environment of care Mike had built, a home where effort and perseverance mattered more than money or luxury. Mike's pride in Ethan was immense, even when the world around them overlooked their struggles. Health concerns were another constant source of anxiety. Ethan's early abandonment had left him vulnerable to illnesses, and Mike often stayed awake, monitoring fevers or discomfort. Trips to clinics were frequent, often taking up hours of his day and adding to his already heavy workload. Insurance coverage was minimal, and medical bills were a perpetual worry. Yet Mike navigated each obstacle with ingenuity and persistence, finding community resources, asking for charity assistance, and negotiating payment plans whenever necessary. He treated each challenge not as a burden, but as part of the responsibility he had willingly accepted. Social life for Mike and Ethan was limited but meaningful. Playdates were few, as many parents were wary of Mike's humble circumstances, but within the small circle of friends and neighbors who accepted them, Ethan flourished. He learned to interact with kindness, share what little he had, and develop empathy for others. Mike emphasized the importance of character over wealth, teaching Ethan that strength lay in integrity, compassion, and resilience. The boy absorbed these lessons, developing a moral compass that impressed even the adults around him. Mike's personal life was almost non-existent. Romantic relationships had to be postponed indefinitely, and friendships often took a backseat to the demands of childcare. Yet he never regretted his choices. Ethan was not just a responsibility or a challenge. He was a son, a part of Mike's identity that brought purpose and meaning to every struggle. Each sacrifice, whether it was skipped meals, long nights, or missed opportunities, was outweighed by the knowledge that Ethan was safe, nurtured, and loved. By the time Ethan turned 7, his personality was fully formed. He was bright, energetic, and fiercely loyal to Mike. The bond between them had become unbreakable. Mike watched him grow with pride and worry in equal measure, aware that the world could still be harsh and unkind. Yet each milestone, tying shoelaces, riding a bicycle, reading independently, reinforced the rewards of his unwavering dedication. The small apartment, once dreary and confining, had transformed into a lively space full of laughter, learning, and love. Education remained a priority. Mike ensured Ethan had the tools to succeed, even if it meant further sacrifices. He saved for school supplies, painstakingly found scholarships and free programs, and made every learning opportunity a family affair. Homework sessions often spilled into evenings, with Mike sitting beside Ethan, guiding him patiently, encouraging curiosity, and celebrating achievements. Despite the challenges of limited finances and a chaotic schedule, Ethan developed into a bright, confident student, equipped with both knowledge and the moral grounding imparted by his father. Evenings were a mixture of routine and reflection. Mike often sat with Ethan on the small balcony, watching the city lights and reflecting on the years since that rainy night. He marveled at how far they had come, from the terror and uncertainty of rescue to the stability and warmth of their current life. Every scraped knee, every fever, every moment of doubt had been met with love and persistence, building a foundation that could not be shaken by the hardships of the outside world. By the time Ethan approached his 10th birthday, the boy was not only intelligent but deeply aware of the world around him. He could express gratitude, understand empathy, and articulate complex thoughts far beyond his years. Mike, although exhausted at times, looked on with pride, knowing that the years of struggle had created not only a survivor but a compassionate, strong young boy. Their home, though modest and lacking luxury, was rich in the intangible wealth of trust, loyalty, and love. Through it all, Mike's unwavering commitment never wavered. He had faced exhaustion, poverty, and societal judgment, yet he had never questioned his decision to rescue and raise Ethan. Every challenge was met with determination, every hardship with resilience. Mike had not only given Ethan life and safety, but had shaped the boy's character and perspective on the world. In doing so, Mike had discovered his own strength, courage, and capacity for unyielding love. By the end of the decade, the bond between Mike and Ethan had become the centerpiece of their existence. The small apartment, once a place of struggle, had been transformed into a sanctuary filled with warmth, memories, and laughter. The challenges of the past 10 years had left their marks, yet they had also forged an unbreakable connection. Mike knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Ethan, once abandoned and alone, had found not only a father but a home, a life filled with love, and a chance to grow into the remarkable person he was always meant to be. It was a bright Saturday afternoon in Los Angeles, the sky clear and the streets bustling with life. Mike decided to take Ethan out to celebrate his first excellent report card, a reward for all the late-night studying, reading sessions, and patience both father and son had endured. Ethan, now 10, bounced eagerly in his car seat, chattering about his grades, his friends, and his dreams of one day becoming a doctor. Mike smiled, a warmth spreading through him as he listened, feeling the simple joy of a father and son outing. For the first time in years, the world seemed ordinary, safe, and full of possibility. They drove slowly down the familiar streets, Mike's old Honda humming beneath them. Ethan's laughter filled the car as he pointed out street performers, dogs being walked, and ice cream trucks making their rounds. The city, with its relentless energy and noise, felt like a protective cocoon in that moment, a world where nothing could touch them. Mike had been careful in planning the outing, checking traffic, choosing a route with minimal risk, and making sure Ethan's seatbelt was secure. Yet life, as it often did, had other plans. At a busy intersection near downtown, a black SUV suddenly appeared, barreling through a yellow light at an impossible speed. Mike saw it too late. The driver was distracted, the vehicle gleaming with wealth and privilege, completely unaware of the chaos it would unleash. In the split second before impact, Mike's instincts took over. He twisted in his seat, shielding Ethan with his own body, his arms wrapping tightly around the boy, pressing him close to his chest. The impact was violent, throwing the Honda across the asphalt. The sound of metal crunching, glass shattering, and tires screeching filled the air like a thunderclap. Mike hit the pavement hard, his back and shoulder aching, bruises already forming where the car had twisted. Through the fog of pain, he held Ethan tight. The boy's small body was pressed against him, trembling from shock, his wide eyes staring into Mike's with confusion and fear. Mike's heart raced as he assessed the situation. Ethan was breathing, albeit shakily, and there was blood on his forehead where it had hit the edge of the seat. Adrenaline surged through Mike, drowning out his own pain as he focused on the boy. "Hold on, Ethan. You okay? You okay?" he repeated, each word a lifeline. The driver of the SUV, a well-dressed woman in her 40s, rushed out, her heels clicking frantically against the asphalt. She was Mrs. Johnson, wife of Richard Johnson, one of Los Angeles's most prominent real estate tycoons. Her eyes widened as she saw Mike sprawled on the ground with Ethan in his arms, a mixture of horror and disbelief painting her face. She stumbled toward them, her hand extended as if instinctively to take the child. Mike's gaze snapped to hers, the protective fury of a father overriding all caution. "Step back. Don't touch him," he shouted, his voice raw with emotion. Mrs. Johnson froze for a moment, taken aback by the intensity in Mike's voice. Ethan's head was bleeding, his small body trembling, and the situation was chaotic. Mike's urgency left no room for hesitation. He called for emergency services, dialing 911 while cradling Ethan, explaining the accident and the boy's injuries as best he could. Paramedics arrived within minutes, their efficiency a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding the accident. Mike watched them lift Ethan onto a stretcher, securing him carefully. the boy's tiny hand clutching Mike's thumb as if he could anchor himself to safety through the warmth of the man who had saved him. At the hospital, Mike followed closely, his wet clothes sticking to his bruised body. He refused to let Ethan out of his sight, even as nurses and doctors took the boy to the emergency room. The staff worked quickly, assessing the injury as a concussion, a superficial cut on the forehead, and minor bruises across his torso. Mike stood by, gripping the silver necklace that had been around Ethan's neck since the day he found him, a talisman against the fear gnawing at his heart. Each monitor beep, each muffled command from the medical team heightened his anxiety. Every second felt like an eternity. It was during this chaotic emergency that Mrs. Johnson's gaze fell on a small, distinct birthmark near the back of Ethan's neck. Her breath caught, the color draining from her face. She stepped closer, bending slightly to examine it more closely. It was the same mark her own son had been born with, a detail she could never forget. Her eyes then fell on the silver necklace in Mike's hand. The initials engraved, though worn with age, were unmistakable. Suddenly, the realization struck her with full force that this child was her long-lost son missing for 10 years. Her knees weakened, and she gripped the edge of the gurney, her mind racing to reconcile the years of grief, loss, and unanswered questions. Mike noticed her reaction but didn't understand it fully. He only knew that Ethan was in danger, and he could not allow anyone to take the boy from him while he was in such a vulnerable state. Yet the hospital staff, recognizing her authority and influence, allowed Mrs. Johnson to approach, insisting she was Ethan's mother. Mike's protective instincts flared.
"No, he's mine. He's been mine for 10 years.
He shouted, voice cracking, tears mingling with rainwater still drying on his cheeks. He tried to explain the night he found Ethan, the years of care, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the love he had poured into the boy's life. The situation became a delicate standoff, tension radiating through the emergency room. Mike knew he could not stop the medical procedures, but he refused to relinquish his claim to the boy. Paramedics and nurses carefully maneuvered Ethan onto the treatment table, monitoring his vitals, while Mrs. Johnson hovered, trembling between awe and fear. The contrast was stark. Mike, a scrappy man of modest means, covered in bruises and dirt, standing resolute over the boy he had raised. And Mrs. Johnson, polished and distraught, realizing the impossible truth that her child had survived, nurtured not by wealth, but by the unwavering devotion of another man. As doctors worked to stabilize Ethan, Mrs. Johnson finally broke down. Her voice shook, barely audible, as she whispered, It's really him. My son, my Ethan." Mike's heart raced at the admission, the acknowledgement that Ethan had a biological family. Yet he knew, deep down, that the connection forged over 10 years of sacrifice could not be erased in moments. He held the necklace tighter, the tangible proof of years spent protecting and loving Ethan. When the concussion and cuts were treated, Ethan opened his eyes, looking around with curiosity and caution. His gaze met Mike's first, recognition and trust shining through. He did not understand the legal or social implications of what had just happened, but he knew who had been there for him through the cold nights, the lonely days, and the endless challenges. Mike smiled, brushing wet hair from Ethan's forehead, whispering reassurances and reminding him of the safety they had built together. The room was heavy with emotion, the air thick with unspoken questions and the weight of a decade of love, loss, and devotion. By the end of the day, the truth of Ethan's parentage was clear to all. Mrs. Johnson's tears flowed freely, mingling relief with guilt, shock with recognition. Mike's protective stance softened, though his eyes never left Ethan, silently asserting that the years of care, sacrifice, and unwavering love were not to be dismissed. The hospital had become the setting for a reunion that was both miraculous and terrifying, a collision of past and present, love and legality, instinct and authority. Mike realized that this day, meant to celebrate a simple accomplishment, had become a turning point in their lives. The accident, terrifying as it was, had revealed truths that had been buried for 10 years. Ethan's resilience, the boy's trust in Mike, and the unwavering commitment of a man who had chosen to become a father in the face of adversity all became apparent to everyone witnessing the scene. Yet Mike also understood with a pang of dread that this revelation would bring complications, challenges, and new trials, testing the bond he had nurtured with Ethan for a decade. After the accident, the hospital staff worked quickly to stabilize Ethan, ensuring his concussion and cuts were properly treated. Mike stayed by his side, holding the silver necklace tightly in his hand, a talisman of the years he had spent caring for the boy. Mrs. Johnson hovered nearby, her eyes wide with both disbelief and recognition. The tension between the two adults was palpable. One had nurtured Ethan for a decade, the other had given him life and now sought to reclaim him. Doctors suggested a simple but definitive step, a DNA test to confirm parentage. Mike listened, heart heavy, knowing that the results could change everything. The DNA test procedure was straightforward. Yet every moment stretched into an eternity for Mike. Ethan, despite the chaos of the accident, seemed unusually calm, resting in his father's arms as if sensing the gravity of the situation. Mrs. Johnson provided her sample with trembling hands, her eyes darting to Mike and then to Ethan. The nurses reassured Mike that the test would be quick, but every tick of the clock felt like a drumbeat of impending judgment. Mike knew the truth in his heart. He had raised this boy, loved him, protected him, and given him life beyond survival, yet the world's rules and the law operated on blood, not devotion. As the samples were processed, Mike sat with Ethan in a quiet corner of the hospital. He stroked the boy's hair and whispered stories of their 10 years together, the rainy nights when Ethan was found, the sleepless hours, the meals shared, the minor victories in school, and the countless challenges they had overcome. Ethan's small hands gripped Mike's fingers, a silent acknowledgement of their bond. Mike felt a deep, unshakable pride in the child he had raised, and at the same time an unrelenting fear of losing him. The thought that a few pieces of paper could undermine 10 years of love and sacrifice weighed heavily on him. Mrs. Johnson, sitting across the room, could barely contain her own emotions. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she replayed memories of her lost son, the nights spent grieving, the uncertainty, and the hope that had never fully died. The necklace in Mike's hand and the birthmark on Ethan's neck were undeniable proof of the connection she had waited 10 years to confirm. Yet seeing Ethan in the arms of the man who had cared for him stirred conflicting emotions: admiration for Mike's devotion, guilt for the years lost, and fear of confrontation. She struggled to reconcile her long-held maternal instincts with the reality that this boy's life had been shaped by someone else. Finally, the nurse returned, holding the results in her hand. The tension in the room was suffocating. Mike's pulse raced, and he instinctively pulled Ethan closer, as though shielding him from the implications. Mrs. Johnson leaned forward, eager for confirmation. The nurse looked at both adults, then announced, "The DNA results are conclusive. Ethan is the biological son of Mr. and Mrs. Johnson." A hush fell over the room. Mike's chest tightened, a mix of relief that Ethan was healthy and dread for what this meant for the future. Mrs. Johnson's lips trembled as she tried to speak, but only a whisper came out, "My son, my Ethan." Mike absorbed the news with stoic determination. His mind raced through the past 10 years, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the lessons, the protection, and the unwavering love he had given. Legally, Ethan belonged to Mrs. Johnson, but emotionally and morally, Mike had been the boy's father in every meaningful sense. He looked down at Ethan, the boy's eyes blinking up at him, uncomprehending yet trusting. Mike knew that whatever followed, he could not sever the bond they had built. Ethan would not understand why the world wanted to take him away after all they had endured together. Mrs. Johnson's demeanor shifted, oscillating between joy, guilt, and anxiety. She wanted to hold her son, to reclaim the child she had lost. Yet she recognized the truth in Mike's eyes. The man before her was the boy's protector, his father in every way that mattered. After a long pause, she spoke softly. "Mike, I know you've cared for him all these years. I can see it in his eyes, in the way he trusts you. I just don't know how to fix 10 years of absence." Mike met her gaze, the wariness and resolve in his own eyes communicating more than words could. "He's been my son. I raised him, I kept him alive, I loved him every day. That doesn't disappear because of a test," he said. The hospital administration, aware of the legal implications, suggested that Ethan be temporarily placed under Mrs. Johnson's guardianship while arrangements were made for custody and visitation. Mike agreed to cooperate, understanding that the law could not be ignored, but he insisted on remaining a constant presence in Ethan's life. "I'm not giving up on him, he's my son," he said, his voice steady, unwavering. The nurses and social workers nodded, recognizing the complexity of the situation. The law could assign parentage, but it could not erase the decade of care, devotion, and trust. In the following days, arrangements were made for Ethan to stay with Mrs. Johnson in their lavish Beverly Hills home. The boy was overwhelmed by the sudden change, a house filled with luxury he had never known, servants, large rooms, and gardens he had only seen in pictures. Yet every night he would think of Mike, the small apartment filled with warmth, laughter, and simple joys, and the man who had sacrificed everything for him. Mike visited daily, ensuring that Ethan's routine, comfort, and emotional stability were maintained. The transition was delicate, filled with tears, stories, and careful reassurance. During these visits, Mrs. Johnson began to understand the depth of Mike's bond with Ethan. She observed the boy's happiness when Mike arrived, the security he felt in his presence, and the quiet lessons that could not be taught in a home of wealth alone. Conversations were tense but respectful. Mike refused to compete with her for Ethan's love, instead advocating for shared respect, acknowledgement, and understanding of the past decade. Ethan, for his part, adapted slowly, recognizing the legitimacy of his biological mother while maintaining the love, trust, and identity he had built with Mike. Mike and Mrs. Johnson eventually reached an agreement. Legal custody would be acknowledged, but Mike would remain Ethan's father in every practical sense, caregiver, mentor, and constant presence. Mrs. Johnson provided resources, comfort, and support that Mike could never have afforded alone. But she also recognized that no amount of wealth could replace 10 years of dedication, sacrifice, and love. Mike's role was secure, a recognition that emotional bonds can transcend legal documents, that love and devotion are measurable in ways the law cannot fully comprehend. In the end, Ethan's life expanded to include both worlds: the warmth, grit, and lessons of Mike's care, and the resources, comfort, and opportunities provided by his biological family. The silver necklace remained with him, a symbol of survival, protection, and the man who had given him life beyond mere existence. Mike's identity as Ethan's father remained unchallenged in spirit, even as the legal realities were reconciled. The accident had brought them face to face with the truth, but it had also reinforced the unbreakable bond between a boy and the man who had chosen to love him when the world had abandoned him. No sooner had the news of Ethan's identity become public than the storm of media attention descended. Headlines screamed of a lost billionaire's son found and Uber driver claims boy for a decade, framing the story with sensationalism and half-truths. Paparazzi crowded the streets outside the hospital and later, the Johnson mansion, snapping photos of Mike, Ethan, and Mrs. Johnson. Every gesture was scrutinized, every word twisted. Social media erupted with debate, casting Mike alternately as a hero and a manipulative kidnapper. He had expected challenges, but the scale of public judgment was staggering. Mike found himself navigating a new battlefield. Reporters knocked on the door of his modest apartment, phones recording his every word. Every interview felt like a test of his patience and composure, and yet he answered truthfully, explaining the night he found Ethan, the years of care, the sacrifices he had made. Few believed that love alone could create the bond he had forged with Ethan. Public opinion swayed violently from one extreme to another, and the boy, though resilient, began to absorb the tension around him. Mike worried that the world's misunderstanding could shake the trust Ethan had placed in him. The Johnson family, accustomed to influence and control, complicated matters further. Mrs. Johnson insisted on integrating Ethan into their world, pushing for appearances at charity events, family gatherings, and media interviews to reinforce the legal claim of parentage. Mike attended reluctantly, feeling out of place among the polished elites. The chatter about wealth and connections so far removed from the world he had built for Ethan. The tension was constant. Every interaction seemed to carry an unspoken question of ownership, a challenge to the legitimacy of the bond forged through 10 years of care. Richard Johnson, Ethan's father, was both awe-inspired and cautious. He admired Mike's devotion but feared the potential for scandal. The idea that a man of modest means had raised his son while the family had searched in vain for a decade was humbling, yet threatening. Every conversation carried the weight of negotiation: public image versus emotional reality, legal authority versus moral truth. Mike maintained a quiet dignity, refusing to be bullied or diminished, knowing that his priority was Ethan's emotional well-being, not the approval of strangers or the pressures of wealth. Social media continued to amplify the drama. Comment sections overflowed with debates, some condemning Mike as a fraud, others lauding him as a hero. Bloggers speculated about motives, financial gain, and legal loopholes, while talk shows aired panels debating custody, love, and morality. Mike became the unwilling face of a national debate on parentage and the definition of family. Every outing, every hospital visit, and every quiet moment was subjected to scrutiny. The intrusion felt invasive, a constant reminder that the world often misunderstood the simplest truths. Mike's relationship with Ethan faced subtle but significant pressure. The boy, perceptive beyond his years, noticed the tension, the whispers, the cameras, and the disapproving glances. He asked questions, sometimes innocent, sometimes pointed. "Why are people taking pictures of us, Dad? Or are they saying I'm not really yours?" Mike answered with honesty, careful to preserve Ethan's sense of security. He reminded him that love, care, and trust could not be measured by media headlines, and that no matter what the world said, he would always be Ethan's father. Even inside the Johnson mansion, Mike felt the strain. Luxurious surroundings, maids, chauffeurs, staff all seemed designed to highlight his difference. He watched Ethan's interactions with cousins and wealthy peers, noting moments of discomfort or confusion, while Mrs. Johnson tried to orchestrate a seamless integration. Mike quietly protected the routines, habits, and small joys that had shaped Ethan's life. He refused to let the boy be swept entirely into a world that had nothing to do with the emotional foundation they had built together. The conflict between wealth and devotion became tangible when legal advisors suggested restricting Mike's visitation, citing concerns about suitability and environment. Mike's heart sank at the thought of being pushed away, but he fought back, presenting evidence of his caregiving, Ethan's development, and the extraordinary bond they shared. The case became a delicate negotiation of appearances versus truth. Lawyers argued over legal terminology, while Mike focused on daily reality, the boy's comfort, trust, and happiness. Every courtroom discussion, every signed document felt like a negotiation over love itself. Mike discovered allies in unexpected places. A few journalists recognized the truth of his story, publishing nuanced articles that highlighted the sacrifices, dedication, and care he had provided over 10 years. Social workers who had observed him with Ethan testified to his competence and the depth of their bond. Even some members of the Johnson extended family expressed admiration, quietly acknowledging that love, not wealth, had nurtured Ethan into the boy he had become. These voices, while quieter than the media circus, provided Mike with support and reassurance. Despite the external pressures, Mike never wavered in his devotion. Each night, he read to Ethan, tucked him in, and listened to the boy's thoughts and fears. They discussed the media attention, the questions from strangers, and the strange reality of suddenly having a biological family. Mike emphasized resilience, integrity, and self-worth, teaching Ethan that their bond was unbreakable, regardless of public opinion. These private moments became sacred, a counterbalance to the chaos outside. School and daily routines were carefully maintained. Mike refused to let the pressures of wealth, media, and legal maneuvering disrupt the foundation they had built. He negotiated schedules, transportation, and extracurricular activities with precision, ensuring that Ethan's world remained stable, familiar, and nurturing. The boy's sense of security became Mike's guiding principle, outweighing any concern about public perception or legal authority. As months passed, the initial media frenzy gradually subsided, though public interest remained high. Mike and Ethan had weathered the storm of scrutiny, conflict, and judgment, emerging stronger and more united than before. The experience reinforced the truth that family was defined by commitment, love, and daily presence rather than wealth, titles, or biological ties alone. Mike had fought not only for custody but for recognition of the bond that had sustained them both through a decade of hardship and triumph. By the end of the year, Ethan had adjusted to his expanded family world, participating in social events and occasional public appearances, but always returning to the small apartment and the routines that had shaped him. Mike's role was firmly established not merely as a caretaker, but as a father, protector, and anchor. Wealth, status, and social pressure had challenged him, but love had won. Every night as he tucked Ethan into bed, Mike felt a quiet satisfaction. The external battles mattered little compared to the daily victories of trust, laughter, and unbroken connection. Mike understood that the struggle for recognition and respect would continue in various forms: whispers in social circles, media coverage, and occasional legal hurdles, yet he felt equipped to face them. He had proven, to himself and to the world, that fatherhood was defined by more than blood, that the heart's devotion could withstand scrutiny, and that a bond forged through love and sacrifice could not be undone. Ethan, thriving, curious, and resilient, embodied the success of these years, a living testament to tenacity, courage, and unwavering love. As Ethan settled into his life in the Johnson mansion, the comforts of wealth and luxury were dazzling yet unfamiliar. The polished marble floors, expansive gardens, and endless rooms were a stark contrast to the small apartment he had known with Mike. While he appreciated the new experiences, Ethan's sharp mind and intuition quickly noticed that not all members of the family welcomed him with genuine warmth. Whispers in hallways, sidelong glances, and hushed conversations hinted at tensions Ethan could not yet fully understand. He began to sense that some people saw him not as a child to be loved, but as a pawn in a larger game of power and inheritance. It was David Johnson, Richard's younger brother, who Ethan first sensed as a threat. The man's polite demeanor could not mask the calculated glances he cast, often lingering a little too long when Ethan passed by. Ethan noticed subtle manipulations, a suggested game or task that seemed harmless but felt designed to embarrass or isolate him, subtle comments about family fortune, and attempts to plant doubt in his mind about Mike's role in his life. At first, Ethan dismissed these observations, attributing them to imagination or the confusion of adjusting to a new environment. Yet the pattern became undeniable over time, each incident reinforcing a sense of unease. Ethan began quietly investigating. Using the skills and curiosity Mike had instilled in him, he observed interactions, memorized conversations, and pieced together clues from the snippets of information he overheard. One afternoon, while exploring a seldom used wing of the mansion, Ethan discovered a locked drawer in David's study. Inside were documents, old news clippings, and notes detailing Ethan's disappearance years ago. His heart pounded as he realized that these were not casual records but evidence of deliberate planning. a careful orchestration to remove him from his rightful family and manipulate outcomes for personal gain. Horrified, Ethan continued to dig, careful to avoid detection. He found financial statements hinting at attempts to manipulate Richard's inheritance, correspondences with dubious acquaintances, and plans that suggested David's knowledge of Ethan's identity had been used as leverage over the years. The boy's mind raced, recalling events, conversations, and subtle interactions that now made sense in a chilling new light. The luxurious mansion and attentive staff masked the dark undercurrents of ambition and greed, and Ethan felt a wave of anger mixed with fear. He realized that David's schemes were ongoing and that his position in the family remained precarious. Ethan decided to confide in someone he trusted completely, Mike. That evening, as they returned to the familiar apartment Mike had maintained for continuity, Ethan shared everything he had discovered. Mike listened intently, concern deepening with each revelation. His heart sank as he understood the extent of the conspiracy, recalling the subtle ways David had maneuvered behind the scenes to assert influence over Ethan's life. "We need to be careful," Mike said calmly yet with urgency. "This isn't just family drama, it's calculated, and it could put you in real danger if we were not smart about it." Together they devised a plan to gather evidence without alerting David. Ethan used his position in the mansion to continue observing, documenting interactions and suspicious activities. Mike coordinated from a distance, ensuring that the boy was safe and that any confrontations would be strategic. They realized that while the law and the Johnson family's wealth could offer protection, the immediate safety of Ethan depended on vigilance, discretion, and intelligence. The boy was learning firsthand how to navigate not only the complexities of family politics, but also the moral responsibility of exposing wrongdoing without endangering himself. Over the following weeks, Ethan's investigation revealed the depth of David's manipulation. He had not only attempted to interfere with Ethan's upbringing, but had also cultivated allies within the household staff members who were complicit, whether through loyalty or fear, and distant relatives who supported his schemes to advance their own positions. Ethan meticulously recorded names, dates, and incidents, storing the information in a hidden notebook that Mike reviewed each evening. Every discovery strengthened their resolve, reaffirming that their family bond forged through years of love and care was worth defending against deceit and betrayal. The tension between Ethan and David escalated subtly. David attempted to undermine the boy through psychological manipulation, offering praise for minor accomplishments while subtly criticizing Mike, planting doubt in Ethan's mind about the legitimacy of their shared life. Ethan, however, remained grounded, drawing strength from the trust he had built with Mike. He began confronting David's remarks calmly, questioning motives and challenging narratives with facts he had gathered. The encounters, though tense, were empowering for Ethan, reinforcing his understanding of integrity, courage, and the importance of standing up against manipulation. Mike, observing Ethan's growing resilience, provided guidance without interfering overtly. He coached the boy on strategy, critical thinking, and emotional self-protection, emphasizing that the goal was not confrontation for its own sake, but the exposure of truth and the safeguarding of family. Mike's mentoring extended beyond tactics. He reinforced the moral compass he had instilled over the past decade, teaching Ethan to act with honesty, patience, and deliberate thought. The combination of Ethan's intelligence and Mike's experience created a formidable partnership, united by necessity and the strength of shared history. Ethan's courage was tested when he confronted a staff member who had been subtly feeding information to David. The boy used diplomacy, observation, and tact to uncover complicity without triggering retaliation. He carefully documented the admission, adding another piece to the puzzle, further confirming that the threats he sensed were real and intentional. Mike's pride was evident, though tempered by concern. He recognized that Ethan's growth into a perceptive, strategic thinker was being accelerated by circumstances no child should face. Yet the boy's innate wisdom and emotional resilience made him capable of navigating these complexities. By piecing together the evidence, Ethan and Mike began to formulate a broader strategy. They considered legal counsel, potential media exposure, and direct confrontation with David, weighing risks and benefits carefully. The goal was not only to protect Ethan but to dismantle the infrastructure of deceit David had built over the years. Ethan's observations, combined with Mike's knowledge of the world beyond wealth and privilege, allowed them to anticipate moves, recognize patterns, and act with precision. Their strategy was cautious yet decisive, blending in intellect, moral clarity, and emotional fortitude. One evening, as they reviewed the collected documents and notes, Ethan looked up at Mike with determination. "We can stop him, can't we?" he asked. Mike nodded, a mix of pride and gravity in his expression. "Yes, we can, but we have to be smart. Every step we take has to protect you first. Truth will win, but we have to plan carefully." The boy absorbed the words, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the reassurance that he was not alone. Together, they represented a force of truth and devotion that wealth, manipulation, and greed could not easily undermine. The realization of David's schemes brought a renewed sense of purpose to both father and son. Ethan's understanding of the world expanded, grasping the complexity of human behavior, the intersection of morality and ambition, and the value of trust, courage, and loyalty. Mike, in turn, marveled at the boy's growing insight, recognizing that the years of nurturing, teaching, and guiding had equipped Ethan to face challenges that many adults would struggle to navigate. Their bond, tested by years of adversity and now by the threat of deception from within the family, solidified into an unbreakable partnership. Through careful observation, documentation, and strategic planning, Ethan and Mike positioned themselves to confront David and neutralize his influence. Each piece of evidence, each carefully recorded conversation, and each subtle maneuver strengthened their position. They understood that the ultimate goal was not revenge but justice, the protection of Ethan's life, and the affirmation of a decade-long bond built on love, sacrifice, and trust. The mansion, once a place of luxury and superficiality, had become a battlefield of intellect, integrity, and courage, where the true measure of family and devotion would ultimately be revealed. Ethan had spent weeks observing David and the subtle manipulations that haunted the Johnson household. Each glance, each whispered conversation, each orchestrated event pointed to a deeper, more calculated scheme than he had first realized. By now, Ethan understood that he was not only at the center of a family reunion, but also at the center of a dangerous web of greed, ambition, and deceit. He had to act, but cautiously. The mansion, for all its beauty and luxury, held traps and observers at every corner. Ethan needed an ally he could trust completely, someone outside the household with the knowledge, experience, and instinct to protect him. That person was Mike. Late one evening, after the household had quieted and the staff were busy with routine tasks, Ethan retrieved a small, hidden phone he had managed to keep from David's watchful eyes. His fingers trembled as he typed the first message, knowing that one misstep could alert the conspirators. The message was simple, direct, and coded just enough to convey urgency without revealing details. If intercepted, Mike, I need your help. Something is very wrong. Can you come? He hit send, heart hammering, fully aware that every second mattered. Mike received the message on his phone while at the apartment he had maintained for continuity in Ethan's life. He felt a chill run down his spine as he read the words. Though short, the message carried a weight that spoke volumes about the boy's perception and fear. Without hesitation, Mike began planning his approach. He knew he couldn't storm into the mansion. Discretion and strategy were paramount. He would need to coordinate with Ethan, observe and document without arousing suspicion, protecting the boy while gathering irrefutable evidence of David's ongoing manipulation. The next evening, Mike arrived near the mansion, parking a block away to avoid drawing attention. He watched the sprawling estate from the shadows, noting the routines of staff and the comings and goings of family members. Using the phone as their secure line, he and Ethan exchanged brief, coded updates. Ethan described conversations, behaviors, and subtle actions David was orchestrating to isolate him from Mike and assert control over his life. Each piece of information added clarity to the picture, revealing the calculated nature of David's schemes and the network of complicity he had cultivated among certain staff members. Ethan began collecting physical evidence as well. He took discreet photographs of documents left unattended in David's office, recorded audio of whispered instructions to staff members, and made careful notes of financial transactions and communications. Each item was stored securely, often hidden in places only Ethan knew. His careful observation skills, honed over months of attention and curiosity, allowed him to anticipate David's movements and avoid detection. Mike guided him remotely, teaching him how to collect evidence without leaving a trace and emphasizing that safety must come first. The stakes were high. One misstep could lead to immediate confrontation or even retaliation. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility, balancing the fear of discovery with the urgency to act. Late at night, he would often sit in the darkened corners of the mansion, reviewing his notes and planning the next steps with Mike. He learned to read the staff's reactions, noticing tension when certain topics arose, subtle exchanges between David and his allies, and the power dynamics that dictated behavior. Mike taught him to be patient, to wait for the right moment, and to recognize the difference between incidental information and actionable intelligence. Over the following weeks, their operation became increasingly sophisticated. Ethan's hidden phone was their lifeline, each message a strategy update or a warning. Mike advised him on how to maintain appearances, so that David and the staff would not suspect that Ethan was actively collecting evidence. They developed a system for documenting each incident with timestamps, descriptions, and photographs when possible. This meticulous approach ensured that when the time came, they would have undeniable proof of manipulation, deception, and threats to Ethan's well-being. Ethan also began building alliances quietly within the household. He identified staff members who were reluctant participants in David's schemes, employees who were hesitant or nervous about following morally dubious instructions. With subtle questions and careful encouragement, Ethan coaxed information from them, framing his inquiries as innocent curiosity about household operations rather than a deliberate investigation. This delicate maneuvering expanded the information he could collect, providing further insight into the scope of David's influence. Mike guided him on the ethical use of this information, emphasizing that coercion was never the goal, only clarity and evidence. Despite the constant surveillance and pressure, Ethan's confidence grew. He realized that his ability to perceive manipulation, combined with Mike's guidance, allowed him to act decisively while maintaining safety. Each successful collection of evidence reinforced his belief in the necessity of their mission. At the same time, the experience deepened the bond between him and Mike. The boy had learned that strategy, courage, and patience were as important as love, trust, and loyalty. The shared purpose strengthened their partnership, blending emotional connection with practical skill in a way that few could comprehend. Mike remained vigilant from outside the mansion, monitoring developments and providing guidance. He coordinated logistics, suggested techniques for discreet documentation, and helped Ethan prioritize the most critical evidence. He reminded the boy constantly that their goal was protection and truth, not confrontation for its own sake. Mike's calm presence, though physically distant, gave Ethan confidence to act. The phone became a conduit for both instruction and reassurance, a lifeline connecting father and son across the gap of wealth, privilege, and danger. One pivotal evening, Ethan uncovered a series of emails and notes revealing David's long-term planned manipulation of family assets, discrediting of Mike in public eyes, and attempts to isolate Ethan from both his biological family and Mike. The implications were clear and dangerous. Ethan immediately messaged Mike, detailing the findings, sending photographs and transcriptions. Mike analyzed the evidence carefully, confirming that it not only demonstrated intent but could serve as legal and protective documentation if the need arose. The stakes were higher than ever, but their preparation and meticulous collection of proof provided a sense of control in a chaotic situation. Throughout this period, Ethan also had to navigate normal childhood experiences, school, homework, friendships while maintaining the secrecy of his investigation. Mike emphasized balance, teaching him to compartmentalize responsibilities and maintain normalcy to protect both his mental health and his ability to operate effectively. This dual life, while stressful, honed Ethan's resilience and problem-solving skills. He learned to manage fear, uncertainty, and moral complexity while preserving the fundamental trust and love between him and Mike. By the end of several intense weeks, Ethan had compiled a comprehensive body of evidence of photographs, recordings, documents, and first-hand observations. Each item corroborated the others, creating a narrative that demonstrated not only David's intent to manipulate and control but also the mechanisms he had used to execute his schemes. Mike reviewed everything thoroughly, confirming that they had a compelling case to present to the authorities and the Johnson family, ensuring that Ethan's safety, autonomy, and well-being would be prioritized. With the evidence in hand, Mike and Ethan prepared for the next stage, confronting the deception in a controlled, strategic manner that would minimize risk and maximize protection. The boy, though only 10, had transformed into a perceptive, courageous, and disciplined investigator under Mike's guidance. Their partnership represented a combination of love, trust, and tactical acumen, demonstrating that family bonds forged through care and sacrifice could overcome manipulation, greed, and danger. The mansion, once a symbol of privilege and intimidation, had become the stage for a battle of intelligence, courage, and truth. Once Ethan had compiled the evidence and sent it securely to Mike, the next step became clear: professional intervention. Mike knew that confronting David directly without legal support could be dangerous. He contacted a trusted detective, a retired lapped officer who had once worked with him during minor incidents in the city. The detective, familiar with Mike's integrity and dedication to Ethan, agreed to assist. Together they began planning a careful operation to expose David's manipulation without endangering the boy or themselves. Mike understood that strategy, timing, and precision would determine the outcome of this high-stakes confrontation. The first task was to organize all the evidence Ethan had collected into a cohesive, chronological record. Photographs, recorded conversations, documents, and notes were meticulously cataloged. Mike reviewed each piece, cross-referencing dates, locations, and potential witnesses. The goal was to ensure that the evidence could withstand legal scrutiny and leave no room for misinterpretation. Every item had to tell a clear story: David's intent, his manipulations, and the potential harm he had orchestrated. Mike spent long nights in the apartment, laying out the documents, reviewing digital files, and consulting with the detective to ensure nothing was overlooked. Once the evidence was organized, Mike coordinated with the detective to plan a controlled operation. The strategy involved simultaneous steps monitoring David's activities, capturing real-time proof of manipulative behavior, and ensuring Ethan's safety at all times. Surveillance equipment was discreetly placed around the mansion with the cooperation of trustworthy staff members who had witnessed David's scheming but feared repercussions. Each camera, recorder, and hidden microphone was positioned to capture unequivocal proof while remaining undetectable to David. Mike had to balance the need for comprehensive documentation with the ethical responsibility to protect Ethan and other innocent parties from undue harm or exposure. Mike also prepared Ethan for his role in the operation, teaching him to observe without being noticed, to document with discretion, and to communicate securely. They practiced signal systems, agreed on safe words, and established protocols for emergencies. Ethan's natural intelligence, attention to detail, and years of careful observation made him an invaluable partner in this operation. Mike emphasized that their primary mission was safety, not confrontation, and that patience and restraint would be essential. The boy absorbed every lesson, understanding the stakes and embracing the responsibility without fear. The operation commenced over several days. Ethan, under the guise of normal household activity, continued to observe David, recording conversations, instructions to staff, and any attempts to manipulate him or undermine Mike. Each night he transmitted encrypted updates to Mike, who monitored the situation from a nearby location. The detective coordinated with Mike, reviewing real-time footage and advising on legal strategies to ensure that any evidence collected could be presented effectively in court. Every movement had to be deliberate, every action calculated to protect Ethan while documenting David's wrongdoing. One afternoon, the opportunity arrived. David, unaware that his actions were being recorded, attempted to coerce a staff member into falsifying reports about Ethan's behavior, claiming that the boy was disruptive and unsuitable for shared custody arrangements. Ethan had anticipated this move and recorded the interaction on a hidden device. Mike, observing the footage in real time with the detective, saw David's strategy unfold exactly as planned. The evidence was undeniable: coercion, manipulation, and intent to interfere with legal and familial rights. This was the moment they had been preparing for. Mike and the detective contacted law enforcement, presenting the compiled evidence and coordinating a tactical plan for intervention. Officers were briefed on the situation, the potential risks, and the goal of protecting Ethan while apprehending David. Every detail was accounted for, including the presence of household staff, the movement of family members, and the layout of the mansion. Mike's intimate knowledge of David's routines, combined with the meticulous documentation from Ethan, allowed law enforcement to act with confidence. The operation was set to ensure maximum safety and maximum impact. On the day of the intervention, officers moved in quietly, positioning themselves strategically around the mansion. Mike and the detective coordinated from a secure location nearby, communicating via encrypted channels with the field team. Ethan remained in a safe area, aware of the plan and following instructions precisely. As David attempted to execute another manipulative act, officers entered the room and intercepted him. He was caught in the act, trying to coerce a staff member, unaware that his every word and action had been recorded. The confrontation was swift, controlled, and effective. David had no opportunity to escalate the situation, and Ethan remained unharmed throughout. The evidence collected was presented immediately to law enforcement and legal representatives. Every recording, note, and photograph reinforced the narrative of David's long-term scheme: manipulation of family members, coercion of staff, and attempts to undermine both Mike and Ethan. The clarity and comprehensiveness of the documentation left no room for dispute. Officers and legal advisors confirmed that the evidence met all standards for criminal investigation and civil proceedings. David's actions were undeniable, and the law was prepared to intervene decisively. Following the operation, Ethan was debriefed carefully, ensuring he understood what had occurred without being traumatized. Mike provided reassurance, explaining that their careful planning and adherence to safety protocols had prevented any harm. He emphasized that courage, intelligence, and vigilance had been critical, and that Ethan's careful observation and documentation had been invaluable. The experience, while intense, reinforced Ethan's confidence and trust in Mike, highlighting the strength of their partnership. David was taken into custody, facing charges that reflected both the criminal and manipulative elements of his behavior. Legal proceedings were paired to address the complexity of his schemes, and the evidence compiled by Ethan and Mike was central to the case. The meticulous planning, careful execution, and ethical considerations ensured that justice could be pursued without endangering any innocent party. Mike's role, though unconventional, was validated by the precision, integrity, and effectiveness of the operation. In the aftermath, the mansion and the Johnson family experienced a profound shift. Trust was reevaluated, loyalties were reconsidered, and the long-overlooked contributions of Mike as Ethan's father were formally acknowledged. Ethan, having witnessed the consequences of careful planning, courage, and moral integrity, gained a deeper understanding of justice, strategy, and responsibility. Mike reflected on the operation, proud not only of the outcome but of the growth, resilience, and bravery demonstrated by the boy he had raised. The operation had confirmed one truth above all: love, vigilance, and strategic action could protect family and ensure justice even in the face of wealth, manipulation, and deceit. Mike's unwavering devotion, combined with Ethan's intelligence and courage, had neutralized a dangerous threat and safeguarded the boy's well-being. Together they had transformed a situation fraught with peril into a demonstration of trust, integrity, and the unbreakable bond between father and son. After the arrest of David Johnson, the atmosphere within the Johnson mansion and surrounding family circles shifted dramatically. The truth, once buried beneath years of manipulation and careful deception, was now undeniable. The meticulously collected evidence, combined with the observations and recordings Ethan had provided, left no room for misinterpretation. David's schemes were laid bare: coercion, manipulation of household staff, attempts to discredit Mike, and calculated efforts to control Ethan and the family's resources. The legal system now had all the proof it needed to pursue justice, and the implications for both the family and Mike were profound. Mike watched the developments closely, maintaining a protective presence around Ethan while the legal process unfolded. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to acknowledge a cautious sense of relief. The danger posed by David was neutralized, and the meticulous documentation they had prepared ensured that Ethan's safety and well-being would no longer be jeopardized by deceitful family members. Mike also felt a renewed sense of validation. The years he had devoted to raising Ethan, the sacrifices he had made, and the unwavering love he had given were now recognized not just by law but by the people around him. The Johnson family, initially stunned by the revelations, moved to reconcile with reality. Mrs. Johnson, having spent years grieving the loss of her son, now faced the complex emotions of relief, guilt, and admiration. She acknowledged publicly and privately the depth of Mike's devotion and the role he had played in keeping Ethan alive and nurtured. Richard Johnson, though initially hesitant to accept the full implications, expressed gratitude for Mike's unwavering care, recognizing that without his intervention, Ethan might not have survived the past decade. These acknowledgments were accompanied by a mix of emotions, from sorrow over the lost years to appreciation for the man who had stepped into the role of father when it mattered most. Legally, Mike was cleared of any wrongdoing. The evidence demonstrated unequivocally that he had acted solely out of compassion, responsibility, and love. The narrative that had painted him as a potential kidnapper or manipulator was dismantled, replaced by a clear account of heroism and dedication. Media outlets that had sensationalized the story now reported the truth: Mike was a devoted father who had rescued and raised Ethan under extraordinary circumstances. Headlines praised his courage, integrity, and unwavering commitment, transforming public perception from suspicion to admiration. Ethan, 10 years old and remarkably perceptive, absorbed the developments with a mixture of curiosity and relief. He observed how Mike was treated by the authorities, family, and media, and he understood, even at his young age, the significance of truth and justice. The experience reinforced his bond with Mike, deepening his appreciation for the sacrifices and dedication that had shaped his life. He also recognized the vulnerability and fallibility of those who had sought to manipulate him, and he began to develop a nuanced understanding of morality, justice, and human behavior. David Johnson was formally charged with multiple crimes, including child endangerment, coercion, and attempted fraud. The evidence presented was compelling and comprehensive, leaving the courts little room to question the legitimacy of the accusations. As the legal proceedings commenced, David's attempts to deny responsibility faltered under the weight of the documented proof. Ethan's careful recordings, Mike's testimony, and corroborating statements from household staff and other witnesses created an unassailable case. The judicial system, though formal and deliberate, moved efficiently to ensure that justice would be served. Throughout the proceedings, Mike maintained his composure. He remained focused on Ethan, providing reassurance and support while navigating the public attention and legal complexities. The father-son relationship, forged over a decade of shared experiences, triumphs, and challenges, proved resilient. Ethan found comfort in Mike's presence, understanding that the man who had raised him was not only his protector but the person most invested in his well-being. Mike's calm guidance helped the boy navigate questions from legal representatives, social workers, and even reporters. ensuring that Ethan's voice and perspective were considered without being exploited. As the trial progressed, the Johnson family publicly acknowledged Mike's role in Ethan's life. Their statements emphasized that while biological ties were important, the decade of care, love, and guidance provided by Mike was irreplaceable. The acknowledgement resonated in court, influencing legal perspectives and public opinion alike. Lawyers representing the family reinforced this narrative, emphasizing that Ethan's stability and emotional security had been maintained through Mike's unwavering devotion, which had preserved the boy's safety and nurtured his development. The culmination of the legal process was David's conviction. The charges, supported by airtight evidence, resulted in a sentencing that reflected the seriousness of his offenses. Justice tempered with consideration for the emotional and psychological impact on Ethan was delivered. The conviction served as both a resolution and a deterrent, signaling the consequences of manipulation, deceit, and endangerment within a family context. Mike's role, validated by the court, became an exemplar of responsible, loving guardianship in extraordinary circumstances. With the legal threat neutralized, Mike and Ethan's daily life gradually returned to a sense of normalcy, though now enriched by recognition and validation. The apartment they had maintained as a safe space became a symbol of continuity, stability, and resilience. Ethan continued his education, play, and exploration under Mike's guidance, now supported by the additional resources and acknowledgement provided by the Johnson family. The balance between material comfort and emotional security reinforced the lessons Mike had instilled over the years, ensuring that Ethan's upbringing remained grounded in love, responsibility, and trust. Public attention, while still present, shifted focus. Stories of courage, devotion, and justice replaced the earlier sensationalism. Interviews, articles, and media features highlighted Mike's sacrifices, Ethan's resilience, and the ultimate triumph of truth over deceit. The father-son bond was celebrated as an example of moral integrity and human compassion, inspiring those who learned of their story. The narrative emphasized that family is defined not solely by biological connection but by consistent, unwavering care and protection over time. In private moments, Mike reflected on the journey. The years of struggle, exhaustion, and perseverance had culminated in this moment of vindication. He had faced societal judgment, financial hardship, and personal risk, yet every challenge had reinforced his commitment to Ethan. The boy, now secure in his identity and safety, represented both a continuation of hope and the tangible reward of unwavering love. Mike understood that fatherhood, true fatherhood, was measured not by legal documents but by the consistent application of care, guidance, and moral presence in a child's life. As the dust settled, Ethan and Mike shared a quiet evening together. Sitting side by side, reflecting on the whirlwind of events, the boy's hand rested comfortably in Mike's. Ethan's eyes, bright and confident, mirrored trust and recognition. Mike smiled, realizing that the decade of sacrifices, challenges, and emotional investment had forged a bond that neither law, wealth, nor deceit could sever. Their journey, marked by adversity, courage, and resilience, had concluded one chapter but laid the foundation for a lifetime of shared experience, love, and mutual respect. The conviction of David Johnson, the recognition of Mike's unwavering role, and the restoration of Ethan's security marked a turning point. It was not merely a legal victory but a moral triumph, affirming the enduring power of love, devotion, and truth. Mike's dedication had been tested, scrutinized, and ultimately validated, and Ethan's life had been preserved and enriched through care, vigilance, and unwavering commitment. Together they had navigated danger, deception, and societal pressures, emerging stronger, wiser, and bound by a connection that no external force could diminish. After the conviction of David Johnson and the public acknowledgement of Mike's devotion, a sense of calm began to settle over Ethan's life. Yet beneath the relief lay an undercurrent of emotional tension. Ethan had spent 10 years with Mike, the man who had rescued him, nurtured him, and guided him through the most formative years of his life. The acknowledgement from his biological parents was important, but it could never replace the bond he had built with Mike. As Mike entered the mansion one afternoon, having been invited to meet privately with the Johnson family and Ethan, the boy felt a whirlwind of emotions: anticipation, relief, and an overwhelming surge of gratitude. The reunion was set in a quiet, sunlit room away from the press and the staff. Ethan, who had grown into a perceptive and thoughtful 10-year-old, waited near the window, his small hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. When Mike stepped into the room, the boy froze for a moment, taking in the man who had been his anchor for a decade. Mike's face was lined with fatigue and stress, but his eyes were warm, steady, and filled with love. Ethan's chest tightened, a lump forming in his throat, as he realized the depth of what Mike had endured for him: the sleepless nights, the financial struggles, the constant vigilance, and the personal sacrifices. Mike knelt down to Ethan's level, his arms open, and the boy ran into them without hesitation. The embrace was immediate, tight, and unspoken, conveying 10 years of shared experiences, struggles, and triumphs. Ethan buried his face in Mike's shoulder, tears slipping down his cheeks. He could barely form the words to express the emotions swirling inside him, but his hands clutched Mike's jacket as if afraid to let go. Mike held him close, whispering reassurances, feeling the weight of years, the tension of recent events, and the unbreakable bond that had been forged through love and devotion. Ethan's tears were a mixture of relief, gratitude, and the recognition of sacrifice. He realized in that quiet moment that Mike had been his father not by law but by action, by the countless nights he had stayed awake, the endless meals he had prepared, the homework he had supervised, the encouragement he had given, and the protection he had provided when the world seemed indifferent or hostile. The boy's heart swelled with love and admiration for the man who had chosen to step into a role that no one else could fulfill. Mike pulled back slightly to look into Ethan's eyes, ensuring that the boy understood the sincerity of his words. "Ethan, I've always been here for you," he said gently, his voice thick with emotion. "Every day, every challenge, every victory, I did it all for you. You've always been my son." Ethan nodded, barely able to speak through his tears, whispering, "You always will be, Mike. You re my dad." The simplicity of the words carried a weight far beyond their brevity, encapsulating a decade of love, loyalty, and unwavering commitment. The Johnson family observed the reunion quietly, struck by the depth of emotion between the two. Mrs. Johnson and Richard Johnson had witnessed countless interactions, yet seeing the unfiltered bond, the raw display of affection and trust, brought tears to their eyes. They realized that while they had given life to Ethan, it was Mike who had given him a childhood, a safe space to grow, and a model of moral integrity and resilience. The acknowledgement of this truth changed the family dynamics, bringing a newfound respect for Mike and a renewed understanding of the meaning of parenthood. Ethan, catching his breath, began recounting small stories to Mike, stories of moments only they shared, the rainy nights, the scraped knees, the homework struggles, the victories in school, and the simple joys of daily life. Each anecdote was a testament to the intimacy of their shared life and the depth of their bond. Mike listened, laughed, and occasionally wiped away a tear, realizing that these memories formed the foundation of Ethan's identity. The mansion, the wealth, and the status of his biological parents were secondary to the years of lived experience and love he had received from Mike. The Johnsons, moved by the scene, approached cautiously. Mrs. Johnson spoke softly, addressing Mike directly. "We underestimated everything you've done for him. We thought giving him back his real life was enough, but now we see you've given him so much more. You are his father in every way that matters." Richard Johnson nodded in agreement, his voice equally sincere. "Mike, you've protected him, taught him, and loved him when the rest of us could not. We owe you more than words can express." Mike accepted their acknowledgement with humility, his focus never straying from Ethan, ensuring that the boy understood his value and that their bond remained unshaken. Ethan, absorbing the words from his biological parents, felt a mixture of pride and validation. He understood that Mike's sacrifices were recognized by others, but he also realized that their bond was independent of legal or societal approval. It was built on trust, shared experiences, and unwavering dedication. The recognition from the Johnson family reinforced the importance of the choices Mike had made and the extraordinary love that had guided his actions over the past decade. In the days that followed, the family structured their interactions to honor both biological ties and the father-son relationship between Mike and Ethan. Mike continued to participate fully in Ethan's daily life, guiding him, supporting him, and maintaining the routines that had shaped the boy's character and confidence. Mrs. Johnson and Richard Johnson provided additional resources and opportunities, but they deferred to Mike on matters of emotional care, recognizing that the years of devotion he had shown were irreplaceable. Ethan experienced a balance of stability, love, and opportunity, all while maintaining the core relationship that had defined his upbringing. Mike and Ethan also spent quiet moments alone, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. They walked through the familiar parts of the city, revisited small parks and streets that held memories from the early years, and spoke about the challenges they had overcome together. These walks reinforced the unbreakable bond between them, reminding both boy and father that their connection was enduring and independent of external validation. The past decade, with all its struggles and triumphs, had created a foundation that could withstand any future challenge. As the mansion became a more welcoming and secure environment for Ethan, he often looked to Mike for guidance, reassurance, and comfort. The boy's confidence and resilience grew, grounded in the knowledge that he was loved unconditionally and that Mike would always be present. The acknowledgement from his biological parents, while significant, was integrated into a broader understanding of family, one defined not solely by birth but by consistent care, protection, and emotional investment. In private, Mike reflected on the journey that had begun on a rainy night when he discovered Ethan abandoned in a trash bag. The decades of hardship, the battles against social judgment, media scrutiny, and familial conflict had culminated in this moment of emotional reunion and recognition. Mike understood that fatherhood was not a title conferred by law or biology, but a role earned through love, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. Ethan's tears, words, and embrace were the ultimate affirmation of a decade spent dedicated to another's life and well-being. The day concluded with quiet celebration, absent of fanfare but rich in emotion. Ethan, clinging to Mike, felt the security and love that had defined his life, now reinforced by acknowledgement from all sides. Mike, holding his son close, felt a profound sense of fulfillment and gratitude. The recognition, while meaningful, was secondary to the lived reality they shared. In that moment, the complexities of wealth, power, and societal expectations faded, leaving only the enduring, unshakable bond between father and son, a bond forged in adversity, strengthened by love, and validated by truth. In the weeks following David's arrest and the court's confirmation of Ethan's safety, the Johnson family approached Mike with a proposal that reflected both gratitude and recognition of his role in Ethan's life. Mrs. Johnson and Richard Johnson, fully aware of the sacrifices Mike had made, extended an invitation for him to live part-time in the mansion. The offer was not a legal requirement, but a gesture intended to integrate the man who had been Ethan's father in practice into the boy's new life, while maintaining the emotional continuity that had defined the past decade. Mike listened carefully, weighing the implications for both his own life and Ethan's well-being. The idea of moving into a mansion filled Mike with mixed emotions. On one hand, it represented stability, resources, and a level of comfort he had never experienced. On the other hand, it risked diluting the simplicity and authenticity of the life he had built with Ethan over the years. He spent several nights thinking through the decision, reflecting on Ethan's needs, his own role as a father, and the potential impact of integrating into a wealthy household with its own rules, expectations, and dynamics. Mike recognized that the proposal was not merely about luxury but about safeguarding Ethan's daily life, education, and emotional security in the context of his biological family. When the day arrived for Mike to move into the mansion, Ethan greeted him with a mixture of excitement and cautious curiosity. The boy understood that this transition represented a blending of worlds: the home he had known with Mike and the affluent environment provided by his biological parents. He led Mike through the grand entrance, pointing out rooms, hallways, and gardens he had explored before, all while keeping an eye on his father's reactions. Mike, ever vigilant, noticed how the mansion's grandeur could be overwhelming for a child accustomed to a modest, familiar space. He decided immediately that preserving Ethan's routines and comfort would be his first priority in this new environment. Mike's room in the mansion was prepared with thoughtfulness and care by Mrs. Johnson. It was comfortable, private, and located close enough to Ethan's room to maintain their nightly rituals. The space reflected a balance between comfort and familiarity, allowing Mike to retain a sense of autonomy while integrating into the household. On the first night, Mike and Ethan followed the same bedtime routine they had practiced for years, reading a story, discussing the day's events, and talking about school and personal goals. The continuity reassured Ethan, reinforcing that despite the grandeur and potential distractions of the mansion, the core of their relationship remained unchanged. Over the following weeks, Mike navigated the social dynamics of the mansion carefully. He interacted with staff and extended family members who had once treated him with skepticism or dismissal, demonstrating patience, humility, and authority in his role as Ethan's primary caregiver. He avoided unnecessary conflict, instead focusing on creating an environment that supported Ethan's growth and stability. Mike observed patterns of behavior among staff and family members, noting subtle biases or assumptions about his role, and addressed them with quiet confidence and clear communication. His presence became both protective and stabilizing, establishing boundaries while fostering cooperation and respect. Ethan thrived in the combined environment. With Mike present in the mansion, he was able to enjoy the educational opportunities, extracurricular activities, and social experiences provided by his biological family while retaining the emotional grounding established by his father. Mike continued to guide Ethan in studies, moral lessons, and practical life skills, ensuring that the boy remained both well-rounded and confident in his identity. The balance was delicate, requiring careful attention to schedules, interactions, and emotional responses, but the consistency of Mike's presence made the transition smoother than anyone had anticipated. The Johnsons, observing the dynamic, gradually adjusted their expectations. Miss Johnson attended to her son's needs while deferring to Mike on daily routines, discipline, and personal development. Richard Johnson, who had initially been cautious, recognized Mike's unique contribution and actively supported the integration, providing resources and opportunities without undermining the established father-son bond. The arrangement was unconventional but mutually respectful. Mike retained his role as Ethan's primary caregiver while benefiting from the support and resources of the Johnson family. Mike also helped him navigate the complexities of interacting with cousins, tutors, and peers in the mansion. He emphasized critical thinking, empathy, and resilience, teaching the boy how to maintain confidence and self-awareness amidst new social dynamics. Ethan's emotional intelligence developed rapidly, guided by the dual influence of Mike's hands-on parenting and exposure to the broader environment of the Johnson household. The boy learned to balance social expectations with personal integrity, a skill that would serve him throughout his life. Mike's own life transformed in subtle but meaningful ways. While he had always prioritized Ethan's needs over his own, living in the mansion afforded him opportunities for rest, stability, and reflection. He could pursue continuing education, attend professional development workshops, and engage in community activities he had previously neglected. These opportunities enriched his perspective and enabled him to better support Ethan. Blending personal growth with the practical responsibilities of fatherhood, family meals, outings, and events became opportunities for connection and observation. Mike ensured that Ethan's experiences remained authentic and enriching, guiding him through interactions, reinforcing values, and providing reassurance. He maintained consistency in discipline, education, and moral instruction, ensuring that the boy's character and identity were nurtured without interference. The presence of wealth and privilege was secondary to the cultivation of resilience, empathy, and integrity, values Mike had instilled over the past decade. Media attention gradually diminished, but Mike remained mindful of external scrutiny. Interviews, articles, and social media discussions highlighted the uniqueness of the arrangement, yet Mike focused on the private victories, Ethan's growth, the stability of their routines, and the deepening bond that could withstand any challenge. Each day reinforced the lesson that family is defined by commitment, love, and presence, not merely wealth, status, or legal designation. As months passed, Mike became fully integrated into the household, respected not only by Ethan but by staff and family members who observed his dedication. His role was no longer questioned, and the boy's life flourished under the combined influence of Mike's hands-on care and the resources provided by the Johnsons. The arrangement reflected a modern understanding of family, one built on love, trust, and moral responsibility rather than rigid definitions of biology or inheritance. Ethan often expressed gratitude to Mike, acknowledging the sacrifices made over the years. Their shared experiences, the challenges they had overcome, and the victories they had achieved reinforced an unbreakable bond. Mike's guidance, patience, and unwavering presence had created a foundation of trust and love that neither wealth nor external pressures could undermine. Each night, as Ethan settled into bed, he knew that no matter where they were or what circumstances arose, Mike would be there not just as a guardian, but as the father he had chosen and needed. In private moments, Mike reflected on the journey from that rainy night when he first discovered Ethan to this new chapter of shared life in the mansion. The decade of struggle, sacrifice, and devotion had culminated in a situation that honored both love and family responsibility. Mike understood that fatherhood was measured not by property, privilege, or legal documents, but by consistent care, guidance, and moral presence. Living in the mansion was not a reward for him, but a practical measure to ensure that Ethan's upbringing continued uninterrupted, enriched by resources but grounded in the values that had shaped the boy's life. Together, Mike and Ethan navigated this new chapter with courage, insight, and love. The mansion became a place not only of luxury but of learning, growth, and emotional security. Mike's presence ensured that Ethan's world remained safe, balanced, and nurturing. The Johnson family, recognizing the unique and invaluable role Mike had played, fully embraced his integration into their household, acknowledging that love and devotion are the true markers of parenthood. As the years passed, Ethan grew into a confident and thoughtful young boy. Shaped by the unique blend of experiences from both his biological family and the unwavering guidance of Mike, the mansion provided resources, education, and opportunities that allowed Ethan to explore his interests and talents. Yet it was Mike's presence that truly grounded him. From early mornings of tutoring and reading to late night talks about ethics and decision-making, Mike had instilled in Ethan a sense of morality, resilience, and the knowledge that love was demonstrated through actions rather than words alone. By the time Ethan was entering adolescence, he had begun to reflect deeply on his upbringing. He remembered the rainy night when Mike had found him, the nights of cold floors and cramped apartments, and the sacrifices Mike had made to ensure he had food, warmth, and guidance. These memories were vivid in his mind, forming the foundation of his identity. Despite the grandeur of the mansion, the luxuries and privileges provided by his biological parents could never replace the consistency and dedication Mike had given. Ethan understood, with growing clarity, that the man who had been there through every challenge, every scraped knee, every lesson learned, was the father he had always truly needed. School became a stage where Ethan's confidence and values shone. He excelled academically and socially, drawing on the life lessons Mike had taught him: empathy, integrity, and perseverance. When peers faced challenges, Ethan offered guidance and support, reflecting the nurturing environment he had experienced. Mike remained at the heart of these developments, quietly observing, advising, and celebrating milestones. Ethan would often seek his father's perspective before making decisions, from simple matters like joining a club to more complex moral dilemmas. The trust and respect between them had grown into an unshakable bond that neither time nor circumstance could undermine. During family gatherings at the mansion, Ethan began to recognize the differences in parenting styles. While his biological parents offered resources, guidance, and opportunities, it was Mike who had provided emotional consistency and stability. Ethan noticed how Mike's advice was grounded in lived experience, patience, and genuine care, whereas some of the mansion's activities, though well-intentioned, sometimes felt detached from the reality of life outside wealth and privilege. This contrast reinforced Ethan's understanding that fatherhood was more than providing comfort or education. It was about presence, engagement, and sacrifice. Ethan's recognition of Mike as his true father was further solidified through personal reflection. Late at night, when the mansion was quiet, he would sit by the window in his room and think about the decade he had spent with Mike. He remembered the nights when Mike had stayed awake through storms, comforting him, and the countless mornings they had prepared breakfast together before school. He recalled the encouragement Mike had given him after difficult days, the patient explanations of right and wrong, and the unwavering belief in his potential. Each memory reinforced the realization that Mike's love had been the constant, the anchor in his life. Conversations with Mike also played a crucial role in Ethan's understanding. They discussed life, ethics, and responsibility, exploring the meaning of family and the qualities that made someone a parent. Mike never sought recognition or validation, yet his words carried weight through their honesty, experience, and care. Ethan came to understand that a father was defined not by biology but by action, dedication, and the willingness to sacrifice for the well-being of a child. The more he reflected, the more he internalized that Mike had been the architect of his emotional and moral development. The acknowledgement from the Johnson family further strengthened Ethan's perspective. While they provided additional support and resources, both Mir and Mrs. Johnson consistently deferred to Mike on matters of daily care and moral guidance. They recognized that the man who had raised Ethan during his most formative years was irreplaceable. Ethan observed their respect for Mike, their careful efforts to include him in decisions about his life, and their acknowledgement of the emotional bond that had sustained him through adversity. These interactions reinforced Ethan's understanding that love, consistency, and guidance outweighed wealth, titles, or biological ties. Ethan's adolescence brought new challenges that tested the principles Mike had instilled. Peer pressure, moral dilemmas, and the complexities of social interaction became daily lessons in judgment and character. Ethan leaned on Mike's guidance, seeking advice on friendship, integrity, and making difficult decisions. Each time he followed Mike's counsel and witnessed the positive outcomes, his recognition of Mike as the true father figure in his life deepened. The practical application of Mike's teachings demonstrated that fatherhood was an ongoing commitment, not a static role defined by birth. Significant milestones further cemented this realization. When Ethan achieved academic awards, completed complex projects, or overcame personal challenges, he credited Mike first, acknowledging the guidance, support, and encouragement he had received. Celebrations within the mansion were shared, but Ethan's loyalty and gratitude were always directed to the man who had consistently been present, supportive, and loving throughout his formative years. These moments highlighted the central truth Ethan had internalized: Mike was his father in the fullest sense. Ethan also began to reflect on the moral courage Mike had demonstrated during the confrontation with David Johnson. He understood the risk, the strategic thinking, and the unwavering dedication that had protected him from manipulation and potential harm. These events were not abstract lessons but vivid memories of real danger, responsibility, and sacrifice. Through them, Ethan learned that being a father was as much about protection and advocacy as it was about emotional nurturing and guidance. Mike had embodied every facet of fatherhood, often at great personal cost. Social interactions outside the family reinforced Ethan's understanding. He noticed the respect others gave Mike: teachers, friends, and community members who had witnessed his dedication. The contrast between recognition earned through consistent action versus recognition through privilege became evident to Ethan. He saw clearly that Mike's influence was genuine, earned, and enduring, while some accolades or privileges afforded by the Johnson family, though valuable, lacked the depth of personal investment and sacrifice that Mike had provided. In private discussions, Ethan began expressing his gratitude openly, articulating feelings he had understood for years but never fully vocalized. "Mike, you've always been there," he said one evening, looking his father in the eyes. "I know you re my dad, not because of who gave birth to me, but because you've been the one who raised me, protected me, and loved me every single day. You re my dad in every way that matters." Mike's eyes filled with emotion, his heart swelling with pride, relief, and profound love. He pulled Ethan close, acknowledging the depth of the boy's insight and maturity. As Ethan continued to mature, he carried Mike's lessons into his broader life. His sense of justice, empathy, and resilience guided his interactions with peers and mentors. He made decisions rooted in ethical principles, informed by the example Mike had set. The boy's identity, though enriched by the resources and opportunities of the Johnson family, remained grounded in the love, guidance, and stability Mike had provided. In every sense that mattered, Mike was the father who had shaped Ethan into the confident, compassionate, and morally grounded young man he was becoming. The years solidified a clear truth for Ethan: biology could not define the depth of love, commitment, or guidance a parent provides. Mike had demonstrated these qualities consistently without expectation of recognition or reward. Ethan's awareness of this truth brought a profound sense of gratitude, respect, and admiration. In both private moments and public life, Ethan acknowledged Mike's central role, ensuring that the man who had sacrificed everything for him would always be recognized as his true father. As the weeks and months passed, life in the Johnson mansion settled into a new rhythm, one marked by balance, respect, and an enduring sense of family unity. Mike, having been fully recognized as Ethan's father in practice, continued to live in the mansion, his presence no longer viewed with skepticism or caution but with appreciation and respect. His role was clear: protector, mentor, and guide, the steady force that had shaped Ethan's upbringing and continued to nurture his growth. The integration of their lives had become seamless, a testament to patience, understanding, and the unshakable bond between father and son. Ethan thrived in this environment, moving fluidly between the comforts and resources of the mansion and the grounding presence of Mike. The boy's days were filled with educational enrichment, extracurricular activities, and exploration of personal interests, all while maintaining the emotional security that Mike provided. The structure of the household allowed Ethan to experience both opportunity and guidance, fostering independence without sacrificing the foundational lessons of trust, morality, and resilience that had defined his early years. He learned to navigate social interactions with grace, understanding, and empathy, skills cultivated through both formal education and the lived experience of growing up under Mike's attentive care. Family dynamics evolved as well. The Johnsons, having witnessed the depth of Mike's devotion, began to view him not as an outsider or subordinate, but as an integral member of the household. Mrs. Johnson often consulted Mike on matters regarding Ethan's schedule, education, and personal development, valuing his insight and experience. Richard Johnson likewise respected opinions and recognized that the man who had devoted 10 years to raising his son possessed knowledge and wisdom that could not be replicated by wealth or social position alone. This mutual respect created an atmosphere of cooperation and harmony, allowing the family to function as a cohesive unit while acknowledging the unique contributions of each member. Household routines became shared responsibilities, blending the traditions of the mansion with the practical, hands-on lessons Mike had instilled over the years. Ethan's mornings began with study sessions guided by Mike, followed by breakfast with his biological parents, and then enrichment activities or school. Evenings were reserved for reflection, discussion, and storytelling, reinforcing the lessons of the day and maintaining the emotional connection between Mike and Ethan. These routines reinforced stability and trust, ensuring that the boy's upbringing remained consistent despite the complexities of wealth, media attention, and family expectations. Celebrations and milestones took on a new meaning. Birthdays, holidays, and special achievements were celebrated in ways that honored both the mansion's grandeur and the intimacy of shared experiences. Mike ensured that Ethan's past memories, simple joys, creative play, and quiet moments of bonding were not lost amidst the spectacle of wealth and status. Ethan's achievements, whether academic, athletic, or personal, were celebrated collectively, with Mike at the center, acknowledging his role in shaping the boy's character and capabilities. This approach reinforced the notion that family was defined not by material resources but by love, guidance, and presence. The harmony extended beyond daily routines. Trust, once fragile, became unshakable. Ethan knew that he could turn to Mike for guidance and support at any moment, and the Johnsons understood that Mike's authority over emotional and moral matters was fundamental to the boy's development. Conflicts that might have arisen due to jealousy, misunderstanding, or social expectation were mediated by clear communication, mutual respect, and shared commitment to Ethan's welfare. Over time, the household transformed from a space of potential tension into an environment of cooperation, warmth, and mutual respect. Mike's influence on Ethan's education was profound. He continued to provide direct guidance on academic subjects, critical thinking, and problem-solving, supplementing the resources offered by tutors and school programs. Ethan's intellectual curiosity flourished under this dual system. He had access to books, materials, and lessons from the mansion's resources, while also benefiting from the experiential, practical knowledge Mike imparted. The boy learned not only how to excel academically but also how to navigate moral and ethical challenges, developing a keen sense of responsibility and integrity. Social relationships expanded positively as well. Ethan built friendships with peers who admired his intelligence, kindness, and maturity, qualities nurtured by Mike's guidance. Family gatherings, once fraught with potential tension, became opportunities for bonding, learning, and shared experiences. Mike's role as a stabilizing presence allowed Ethan to participate confidently, bridging the worlds of privilege and lived experience with ease. The boy's growing social awareness, combined with his emotional security, ensured that he could form meaningful connections without compromising the values instilled by Mike. The media, having observed the transformation, highlighted the unique family dynamic. Stories emphasized the role of love, dedication, and sacrifice over wealth or status. Mike's decades of commitment became a model of moral parenting, inspiring communities and audiences to reconsider the meaning of family. While public attention could have been intrusive, the Johnsons and Mike managed the coverage thoughtfully, using it as an opportunity to reinforce the importance of nurturing, guidance, and emotional presence in raising children. Ethan himself began to articulate his understanding of family in ways that reflected maturity and gratitude. He expressed openly to both Mike and his biological parents that while he valued the resources and opportunities provided by the mansion, it was Mike's presence, guidance, and unwavering love that had shaped who he was. "You're my dad," Ethan would say to Mike, "the man who made me who I am. Everything else is extra." Mike responded with quiet affirmation, proud yet humble, recognizing the boy's insight and the maturity that had developed from years of careful nurturing. Evenings became a cherished time for reflection. Mike and Ethan would sit together, reviewing the day, sharing thoughts, or simply enjoying each other's company. These moments reinforced the core of their relationship, a bond forged through adversity, sustained by love, and strengthened by trust. The mansion, with all its splendor, became a backdrop to these intimate exchanges, a setting in which material abundance complemented emotional richness without overshadowing it. The Johnson family, having fully recognized Mike's role, continued to cultivate a supportive environment. They ensured that Mike's authority in matters of care and guidance was respected, while also providing additional opportunities and resources to enrich Ethan's life. This partnership, grounded in mutual respect, cooperation, and shared commitment to the boy's welfare, exemplified a modern understanding of family, one defined not by biology alone, but by consistent love, presence, and moral guidance. As Ethan approached his teenage years, he carried forward the lessons instilled by Mike: resilience, empathy, integrity, and courage into all aspects of his life. Mike remained his anchor, offering guidance on challenges large and small, and the Johnsons provided support that complemented rather than replaced the foundational lessons learned from Mike. Together, the family functioned as a harmonious unit, blending emotional depth, resources, and opportunity into a cohesive, nurturing environment. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and potential division, had become a home defined by love, respect, and unity. Mike's presence ensured that Ethan's upbringing retained the core values of consistency, guidance, and protection, while the Johnson family's support enriched the boy's experiences without undermining the foundation built by Mike. Life, though complicated by past struggles, had become a testament to the power of love, dedication, and moral parenting. In this harmonious setting, Ethan flourished. Academically, socially, and emotionally, he grew into a confident, capable, and compassionate young individual. The lessons from Mike, reinforced by the opportunities provided by the Johnsons, created a holistic environment in which the boy could thrive. The bond between Mike and Ethan, unshakable and central to the boy's identity, remained at the heart of this family, ensuring that the past hardships transformed into a foundation for lifelong stability, love, and happiness. Years had passed since the chaos of David Johnson's arrest, the court proceedings, and the tumultuous period of media scrutiny. Life for Mike and Ethan had settled into a rhythm defined by love, stability, and shared experiences. The mansion had become a home, not just a building filled with wealth, but a sanctuary where the emotional bond between father and son could flourish. Mike had established routines that balanced Ethan's academic responsibilities, extracurricular activities, and personal growth with moments of relaxation, laughter, and reflection. The boy, now approaching adolescence, thrived in this environment, fully aware of the sacrifices and guidance that had shaped his life. The early mornings began with familiar rituals, a blend of discipline and warmth. Mike would wake before Ethan to prepare breakfast, organize study materials, and review plans for the day. Ethan, in turn, had adopted a sense of responsibility that reflected Mike's teachings. He approached each day with purpose, from school assignments to personal projects, drawing on the principles Mike had instilled: perseverance, empathy, and integrity. The mansion's resources provided opportunities, but it was the foundation built by Mike over a decade that defined Ethan's character. Weekends were reserved for exploration, bonding, and shared adventures. Mike and Ethan would visit local parks, museums, or attend community events, maintaining the connection to the broader world that had been central to Ethan's upbringing. Mike encouraged curiosity, critical thinking, and creativity, guiding Ethan to ask questions, seek understanding, and engage with the world thoughtfully. These experiences reinforced the lessons learned in the quiet corners of their home, blending intellectual growth with emotional development. The balance between opportunity and guidance created a sense of security and confidence that defined Ethan's identity. Family gatherings became celebrations of unity and shared purpose. The Johnsons had fully integrated Mike into the household, acknowledging his role as Ethan's primary caregiver and moral guide. Mrs. Johnson often deferred to Mike on matters of daily care, discipline, and personal development, recognizing that his influence had nurtured the boy into a thoughtful, resilient young individual. Richard Johnson provided support in areas where resources and opportunity could enhance Ethan's life, while respecting Mike's authority in shaping the boy's values, decisions, and character. The family had transformed into a cohesive unit where respect, love, and collaboration replaced the tensions of the past. Ethan's education flourished under this dual structure. He excelled academically, with Mike providing guidance, oversight, and encouragement, and the mansion's resources supplying advanced learning materials, tutors, and enrichment programs. Ethan developed a keen interest in science and literature, pursuing projects and experiments that allowed him to explore concepts deeply. Mike's mentorship ensured that academic achievement was paired with ethical understanding, critical thinking, and resilience. The boy learned to value effort, curiosity, and integrity over mere recognition or material reward. Socially, Ethan grew into a confident, empathetic young individual. He navigated friendships with awareness, compassion, and assertiveness, guided by the moral foundation Mike had provided. Peer interactions, extracurricular activities, and participation in community initiatives reinforced his sense of responsibility and civic engagement. Mike's presence remained central to Ethan's social development, offering guidance on negotiation, conflict resolution, and leadership. The boy's maturity, emotional intelligence, and sense of self were direct results of the decade-long bond that had nurtured him from infancy to adolescence. Despite the mansion's grandeur and the privileges it offered, Mike ensured that humility, empathy, and gratitude were instilled in Ethan. They spent evenings discussing the importance of service, ethical decision-making, and awareness of social inequalities. Mike often reminded Ethan that wealth and status were tools, not measures of character, and that the truest test of a person lay in their actions, compassion, and commitment to others. These lessons, reinforced through lived experience and observation, solidified Ethan's understanding of moral responsibility. Milestones continued to reinforce the depth of their bond. Birthdays, holidays, and personal achievements were celebrated together, emphasizing both the emotional and practical support that had defined Ethan's upbringing. Mike maintained traditions that had been established during their early years in a modest apartment, blending them seamlessly with the privileges of the mansion. These celebrations became symbols of continuity, stability, and the enduring love between father and son. Ethan learned to value not only the material aspects of life, but the deeper significance of commitment, care, and shared experiences. The public acknowledgement of Mike's role had long since been established, but private moments remained sacred. Late-night talks, quiet walks, and shared projects reinforced their connection. Ethan expressed gratitude and understanding, often articulating the significance of Mike's sacrifices and guidance. "Dad," he said one evening while working on a science project, "you've always been here for me, guiding me, protecting me, and believing in me. That's what makes you my father, and I'll never forget it." Mike's heart swelled with pride and emotion, recognizing the boy's wisdom, awareness, and maturity. The bond extended beyond daily routines to life's more profound challenges. Ethan encountered moments of self-doubt, peer pressure, and moral dilemmas, all of which were navigated with Mike's guidance. The lessons in resilience, empathy, and integrity were not abstract but applied in real time, allowing Ethan to develop confidence and decision-making skills grounded in ethical principles. Mike's mentorship ensured that the boy's growth was holistic, encompassing intellectual, emotional, and moral development. Even the Johnson family continued to play a supportive role, recognizing Mike's influence in prioritizing the boy's well-being above status or convention. They provided resources, educational opportunities, and exposure to experiences that expanded Ethan's horizons while respecting the emotional and moral foundation Mike had established. The household operated as a collaborative ecosystem, with each member contributing to Ethan's growth while maintaining respect for Mike's central role as father and guide. As Ethan approached his teenage years, the clarity of his understanding of fatherhood became evident. He recognized that Mike's love, sacrifice, and guidance had defined his life in ways that could never be replaced. The mansion's wealth, privileges, and connections enhanced his opportunities but did not define his identity. Mike's presence, consistency, and moral guidance had shaped the boy into a confident, empathetic, and morally grounded individual. This recognition brought both Ethan and Mike a profound sense of fulfillment and peace. Together, they established routines that balanced education, personal growth, and leisure. They explored the city, engaged in community initiatives, and cultivated hobbies that enriched both their lives. Mike continued to provide mentorship, instill values, and guide Ethan through the challenges of adolescence. Ethan, in turn, expressed gratitude, insight, and understanding, demonstrating the lasting impact of a father who had chosen love, commitment, and sacrifice above all else. The mansion became a home, not just a residence, but a symbol of the unity, respect, and enduring bond between Mike and Ethan. The challenges of the past, abandonment, deception, manipulation, and public scrutiny, had been transformed into a foundation of strength, wisdom, and resilience. The boy thrived emotionally, socially, and intellectually, guided by the man who had nurtured him through every challenge and triumph. In private moments, Mike and Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From the rainy night when Mike first found Ethan to the trials of legal battles, media scrutiny, and familial conflict, their shared history was rich with lessons, resilience, and love. The experiences had forged a bond that neither wealth, status, nor time could diminish. Together, they looked forward to the future, secure in the knowledge that they would face it as a family, grounded in trust, respect, and unwavering love. The years had confirmed what Ethan had always known intuitively. Mike was not only his father by choice and action, but the central figure in his life, who had shaped his identity, values, and worldview. Their shared experiences, sacrifices, and triumphs had created a life full of meaning, security, and happiness. The mansion, the resources, and the recognition were secondary to the profound connection forged over a decade of dedication, love, and presence. As Ethan prepared for each day, confident in his abilities and supported by a loving family, Mike remained a constant source of guidance, mentorship, and protection. Their lives, intertwined by fate, choice, and devotion, exemplified the enduring power of love and commitment. The story that began on a rainy night with a fragile infant abandoned in a trash bag had culminated in a life of stability, growth, and happiness, proving that true parenthood is measured by action, sacrifice, and unwavering devotion. The story of Mike and Ethan is a profound exploration of what it truly means to be a parent, highlighting that fatherhood and motherhood are defined far more by action, love, and sacrifice than by biology. Mike's journey began on a rainy night, when he discovered an abandoned infant and chose to take responsibility for a life that was not legally his. This initial act of compassion set the tone for an entire decade of commitment, demonstrating that love is an active, daily choice. True parenting requires consistency, patience, and unwavering dedication, often in the face of hardship, societal judgment, and personal sacrifice. From feeding Ethan in the middle of the night to guiding him through moral and emotional development, Mike embodied the principle that parenting is measured by the moments you choose to be present, rather than by circumstance or title. Throughout the story, one of the most powerful lessons is the importance of resilience and perseverance. Mike faced countless challenges: financial struggles, social bias, skepticism from authorities, and the constant threat of losing Ethan to forces beyond his control. Yet he never wavered in his commitment, demonstrating that true devotion is tested by adversity. The narrative shows that resilience is not merely enduring hardship, but acting with intentionality, using intelligence, courage, and foresight to protect those you love. Ethan, as a child, observed and internalized these lessons, learning that strength comes not from dominance or wealth but from consistent effort, moral courage, and emotional reliability. The story teaches that when people act with integrity and love, They create foundations that withstand challenges far greater than themselves. Another vital lesson from the story is the recognition that love and moral guidance are more important than wealth, privilege, or status. The Johnson family, though affluent, initially lacked the ability to provide the consistent care, emotional security, and guidance that Mike offered. Their resources could create opportunity, but they could not replicate the lessons in empathy, patience, and trust that shaped Ethan's character. This underscores a critical truth: material resources can enhance a child's life, but they cannot substitute for emotional presence, ethical teaching, and daily commitment. Mike's actions demonstrate that the heart of family lies not in inheritance or legal authority, but in the devotion and responsibility shown day after day. The story also emphasizes the importance of integrity and ethical decision-making. Mike navigated legal challenges, social scrutiny, and the complex moral dilemmas of raising a child not biologically his own, all while maintaining transparency, fairness, and moral clarity. He balanced the need to protect Ethan with the necessity of navigating legal systems and societal pressures. This teaches that true leadership, whether as a parent, mentor, or guardian, requires ethical consistency and courage, even when the consequences are difficult or the path uncertain. The story shows that integrity is not only about following rules, but about doing what is morally right for those who depend on you, even when the world does not recognize or reward your actions. Furthermore, the narrative illustrates the value of collaboration and trust. Mike and Ethan's partnership during the confrontation with David Johnson demonstrates that communication, mutual respect, and shared goals are essential in navigating complex challenges. By working together, they achieved outcomes that neither could accomplish alone, highlighting that relationships built on trust, loyalty, and open communication are powerful tools for overcoming adversity. Ethan's active participation in gathering evidence and strategizing shows that empowering those you care for to act responsibly and courageously strengthens bonds and reinforces moral growth. The story teaches that relationships built on trust and shared purpose create resilience, growth, and success in both ordinary and extraordinary circumstances. The story also underscores the transformative power of recognition, gratitude, and reconciliation. When the Johnson family acknowledged Mike's role and sacrifices, it was not merely an act of politeness, but a profound validation of the years of devotion, care, and ethical parenting that had shaped Ethan's life. Recognition does not erase past hardships, but it honors the effort, courage, and love that sustain relationships through difficulty. This teaches that acknowledging the contributions of others, especially those who act selflessly, strengthens bonds and fosters harmony. It reminds readers that gratitude and respect are critical components of healthy relationships and communities. Additionally, the narrative highlights the importance of moral courage and advocacy. Mike stood firm against manipulation, deceit, and societal pressures to ensure Ethan's safety and emotional well-being. He demonstrated that standing up for what is right often requires bravery, foresight, and persistence, particularly when facing individuals who abuse power. Ethan's development under Mike's guidance illustrates that observing and participating in morally courageous acts teaches children about responsibility, ethics, and the importance of defending what is just. The story communicates that moral courage is contagious, and leading by example can inspire the next generation to act with integrity and conviction. Finally, the story emphasizes that true family is defined by love, commitment, and shared experiences, not simply by biology or legal designation. Mike's role as Ethan's father was earned, demonstrated, and validated over 10 years of daily devotion, patience, and guidance. Ethan's recognition of Mike as his true father, despite the biological connection to the Johnsons, reinforces that family is built through consistent care, emotional presence, and moral guidance. This teaches that human relationships are defined by actions and choices rather than genetics alone, and that enduring bonds arise from shared history, trust, and dedication. In conclusion, the story of Mike and Ethan conveys multiple intertwined lessons: the centrality of active love and devotion in parenting, the value of resilience and perseverance, the primacy of ethical guidance and integrity, the importance of trust and collaboration, and the recognition that true family is defined by care and presence rather than biology or wealth. It demonstrates that adversity can forge strength, love can overcome circumstance, and moral courage can protect and shape lives. The narrative ultimately inspires reflection on what it means to nurture, protect, and guide another human being, emphasizing that the most enduring bonds are those built with intention, sacrifice, and unwavering love. Through Mike's actions and Ethan's growth, readers are reminded that the essence of parenthood, family, and human connection lies in devotion, presence, and the courage to act in the service of those we love, no matter the obstacles. If you found this content helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of my latest videos. If you have any ideas or topics you'd like me to cover, leave a comment below. I always read all your comments.